Am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are we live और हम लोग कुछ वेट कर रहे हैं किसी का?
Yes, sir. We are live. So, good evening, everyone. We have with us Mr. Kuldeep Pisda, who is the speaker for the web development session. Today is the day two of the session, which is the week-long session, and we are just going to start with the session now. So, over to you, sir.
Okay. Hi guys. So yeah, today we will look into JavaScript and ES6. JavaScript is so basically. Let me tell you a bit about what both means, like why I have written JavaScript and ES6. So, JavaScript is one of the top three languages, like that we use mostly for. This is one of the top three languages that is used in the front end development alongside with HTML and CSS. Why ES6? Because in JavaScript by default there were few fundamental features that were missing and that has been added on ES6. So that's why we will be talking about both JavaScript and ES6. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, as I said, JavaScript is one of the top three languages that we need to create the front end. And for folks who have joined today and who are not aware about what is front end, so whatever we see whatever we see in any of the website. For example, you have joined the session via the Gmeet, right? So whatever you're seeing in your desktop in your browser, the all the the time in the right in the left in the left side, the screen sharing, the presentation sharing that I have shared, the participants, the name of the participants, my video, the faces of few people in their profile pics, and all those things. These are all part of the front end thing that you are seeing. So in any of the web application, there are usually two parts. If it is if it is dynamic, if it is not static. So the front end part is the part with which the user interacts normally, and the back end part is the part that with which you don't interact directly, but it is the basically backbone of the whole web application that basically empowers and controls whatever is happening in the front end. For example, right now we are having this conversation, we are having this session via Gmeet, right? So this UI, the front end part is only helping us in in talking with each other, but the backend part is actually that is what is enabling my feed being shared on all of your screens, and our session altogether is being streamed on YouTube as well. So that is the magic of the backend that it is doing. So JavaScript also is one of the exception that JavaScript is also used in the front end as well as in the backend. So what I will do is I don't want this session to be like a lecture sort of thing. No, rather, what I want is I want it to be an interactive session, and that is why we will be we will be coding along with each other. If you don't have your laptops open, I will request you guys to do the JavaScript with me as well. So you don't this time for JavaScript you won't need you don't need don't need to open your VS Code and stuff like that. Rather, I have some arrangement for you guys. So if you open, I have this thing where I will let me share it. Let me share the link with you guys so that you can open it, and when you will open it, I will share you how does it look, how does it look. So let just give me a moment. I thought I would be able to copy that from the shared presentation, but looks like we cannot. So let me share it with you guys in a minute. And here we go. So yeah, okay. So if you have your laptop open with you, you can open this thing in your browser as well. I will be sharing this. Okay, yeah, thank you, Aditya. Aditya has already shared it. So if you open it, you will see something like this that is being appeared on my page as well. I think you will see the same thing along with me. Okay. So are you guys able to see my screen? Like it will be like pretty blunt white background screen. And yeah, Again, I would like to remind you guys that this is not a typical webinar sort of thing. Rather, I want this to make an interactive session. Okay, so if you guys have any question, any silly doubt, is always welcome, and don't hesitate. We all are learning. No one is here to judge you guys, and if you start caring about those things, then honestly, it is not helpful in terms of growth. Okay, so if you have any questions, either put in the chat or simply stop me and ask me the doubt, and I'll be happy to answer you guys. Okay, so yeah, don't hesitate and just shoot the question. Okay, yeah. So throughout the session, to writing JavaScript and other things, we'll be using this thing. Why this thing? Because I think it is very good platform. It is very good website where which we can trick it, and basically we can do all those things which we will have to do. Otherwise you will have to make a JavaScript file, and you will have to run it on the website, and then you have to open the console and all those things, because JavaScript does not usually the output that we'll be doing here, like you won't be able to do that directly on your in any of the web pages. Like it will take some some sort of the alternate way. So that's something that we don't want to explore. So yeah, just open the link and we'll be coding mostly here. Okay, guys. So yeah, getting back to the presentation where we started. Okay, so what can actually JavaScript do, right? So JavaScript actually can change the whole HTML content. So if I say the HTML content, then yeah, literally the whole HTML content can be changed by JavaScript, and that is why we use JavaScript, right? So we use JavaScript to make the website interactive. So if you guys are aware, yesterday we were checking out the website of W3 School site, where what we did was we talked about HTML, we talked about CSS and other things, and we also saw the part of JavaScript and the part of CSS and HTML. So HTML and CSS are only responsible for the presentation, but the interactivity is one thing that is often enabled by the JavaScript thing. So, for example, if in your screen itself, if you click on any of the buttons, right? So, for example, let's say there is an option, there is a button of more options button. So, if you click on that button, a whole menu opens up. I think. Let me share it in a different way. So let me share my whole screen. I think that then you will be able to relate. Uh, okay, I think it was not good idea. Okay, yeah, I think I can share it by here. Okay, so for example, just consider this thing. Okay, whenever I hover upon it, I am getting one menu. So this is something that we can do by CSS. But when I click on the create link, you see this side dialog is coming, right? This is something that we're doing by JavaScript. Like what we're doing is when we click on this button, we are calling some JavaScript function, and that function is basically opening this dialog on the right side, and that is how we are actually accessing it. Okay, so, folks, those who are only watching on YouTube, you are very much invited on the Gmeet. I think that will be more interactive one. Just ask for the links from your respective groups from where you got this link as well. Okay. Yeah, coming back to yeah. So the interactivity part is something that we are enabling via JavaScript. It is not something that we can do with HTML and CSS itself alone. I was also in the same disbelief that yeah, I won't learn JavaScript because I wanted to do everything with CSS without JavaScript. But once I started working on JavaScript, I was like, okay, with JavaScript it is too much fun, it is too much easy. Okay, so yeah, that was a bit about it, how we can manipulate so that was one info, like we can manipulate JavaScript, we can manipulate the HTML thing with JavaScript, and I will show you how we can do it in a while. So for example, yeah, you can simply open this link bit.ly and turn bulb, and I will explain you what we are doing. Okay, bit.ly and then turn underscore bulb. Let's just open that simple example. So it is a I think I will share the tab as well. So if you open this, you will see that we have this simple JavaScript function. Like we have this simple HTML snippet that does something, and on the right side we have this very much we have the output of this Java. We have the output of this HTML and JavaScript combination. So what we do is, like, it says if you want to turn on the light, you click on this, and if you want to turn off the light, you click on the turn off the light button. So let's see. When I click on the turn on the bulb goes. When I click on the turn off the light, the bulb goes off. Again, when I click on the turn on the light button, it goes. When I click on the turn off the button, it basically turns off. So is it something, if you guys are thinking that, like, we are probably we are running some algorithm and we are using some nasty algorithm to basically fill the inside of the bulb with yellow color, and when we click on the turn of the light button, it we basically, like, initiate it to the original version in the off version, and vice versa. So yeah, that can also be done, but that is not something that we are doing here. We are in just, like, we always say this with very proud that, like, we are engineers, and that's how we try to do things. Like, we try to do things in a very smart way. Okay, so yeah, we will see this in two examples, like we were discussing about, right? That we can actually manipulate HTML with this JavaScript, and at the same time we will see how we are doing it. Okay, so let's check this thing. So basically, whatever this the output of this code is this only. Okay, so let's understand it. So we had seen this yesterday, right? This is the document HTML, just basically to define that this HTML, this text is basically an HTML document, and then we have this HTML, we have this HTML tag. Again, we have this body tag. Notice that we don't have any head tag, and it is omitted here. If you don't put it, as we discussed again, the same thing yesterday, that JavaScript is like you forgiving. If it will not raise any error saying that you don't have this thing in, well, unlike another, like, real languages like C, Python, or anything like that, where basically they throw an error that this thing is not found, this is missing, and stuff like that. JavaScript won't cry about it. It will just try to present it in a way. It will just try to understand it, and it will present it as it is understanding that whole JavaScript thing. Okay, so yeah, again, we have the body thing, and whatever we put in the body thing, we saw yesterday that gets printed on the screen, right? So we have this S2 thing. What can Java? Okay, if you have any doubt, if it is not the actual JavaScript, then let's do test and KD. If I run, if you see, this is coming over here, right? So basically, this is whatever the code we have over here is basically is getting outputted here itself. So yeah, and when we come into here, we have again this p tag and stuff, and then now we see we have a button over here that says button is again an like, element, a tag of HTML, which we can use, with which we can actually create buttons on the web page. So yesterday, if you remember, pretty much we also had one option that was about input, and that was about type and submit, and then yeah, name equals to submit, and yeah, let's see if that will work as well. So if you see, like, input type submit is also outputting the same thing, and this button is also representing the same thing. So in a way, they are two way of writing, in a way they are two way of creating buttons, and like this is how you can create it. When you are working inside the form, you often people often try to create input type button, input type submit button, input type receive button, and stuff like that. But sometimes this button is also helpful, like when you want to submit this forms asynchronously, like, for example, if you remember, when like whenever let's say whenever we do very good forms nowadays, like, very good modern forms, then when we click on submit, the page does not refreshes, rather, like, a loading button pops up, and like, something happens in that meanwhile, the loading button goes off, and then it represents us, then it says us that, okay, yeah, this is this is what you got, that your credentials are wrong, or anything like that, right? So these that when we don't refresh this thing, we call this as, like, we are actually calling it via, we are actually calling it like in the background, like till the time we get the response, we are just showing the loading button and stuff like that. So whenever we want to do those things, probably this is helpful. It is not like that you cannot do that things with input button as well, but again, like, it varies from person, it varies from your personal side. Like, basically, it is a whole bias, like, you can do pretty much everything with both of the same thing. Okay, now let's try to understand what we actually doing here. Okay, so if you see, we are putting, like, on button when we pass this on click thing. So It is pretty much understandable, right? That whenever we will click on this button, that's what this on click is defining. We will run this thing. And what is this? It is basically like, it is doing something. It is printing something that is like basically gibberish for us. Let's try to break it down with what we're trying a little bit with. Let's try to break it down, okay, in a very simple manner. So document. What is a document? So in JavaScript, this whole HTML thing is actually a, is a document for the web page. For the JavaScript, this is the whole document, and where there we are trying to actually get the element. So if you read it, get element by ID. Okay, from document, get the element by ID. What is ID? My image. If you see, yesterday, we were also printing the images. We also initiated some of the images, and we also put some of the videos. But we did not put this command. We did not put this ID equals to my image property in the img tag, but it was still working. So that also defines that this ID tag is completely optional. Like if you put it, then you can use it. If you don't put it, then it won't just break it. For example, let's see this. If you see, yeah, it still works, right? Like the page is still printing. I obviously this will not work because it is not able to find this. It is not able to find this ID in the whole web page. So this also brings me to my next point, that you can basically define ID to any of the element in the whole web page. We can define ID to this button. We can define ID to this paragraph. We can define ID for this heading. What we're trying to do is a document.get element by ID and my image that will return this whole object. And in this .src property, if you see in .src, we have this pick bulb on .gif, right? By default, the pick that we have here is basically bulb of .gif. So what we're trying to do over here is we are basically updating the whole HTML here. So for example, let's see that as well. Let's inspect it and let's see. I think it will be better if we can have this in the bottom. Okay, and let's try to close this and let's focus on here. Okay, so here if you say we have this thing. Okay, so now when I click on this turn on the light button, you will, okay, oh yeah, okay, we have to run this again. And because we had updated this and it was not rendered properly, it did not had the updated value, so that's why we have to do this. Now if you go over here, you will see that what can the, so you can see that this is the same code that we have put over here, right? Okay, now just check this thing, like the one that I have highlighted. When I click on turn on the bulb, you will see the highlighted one, right? That this basically this value got updated. If I click this one again, then also also it is updating. But since both are the same thing, that's why not change. We are not seeing any of the change. When I click this on the turn of the light button, this the source of the pic gets changed, right? So initially it is pic underscore bulb on, bulb off, and when we click on the turn off button again, if you see, we're again trying to get the same element by ID, and the ID of that element is my image, and then we're directly changing the source, that dot srs equal to this. It is pretty much simple, right? This is how we can we can change anything. To be honest, to be pretty honest, okay, and that is what we are actually doing over here. So yeah, this is how you can, or just to show you that there are two separate images. I will just remove it here, and I will show you that we have one more images that gets printed. So okay, so these are two images. Okay, so what we are and these are two images. Let me show those two images side by side so that you can get the good understanding. So these are two images that we have. When I by default, this image is over here. When I click on this turn on the light button, this source of this image gets replaced by the source of this image that basically has that is a basically different image that has a leg glowing on image and stuff. So basically we are just fooling the people who are actually using the front end stuff. So yeah, this was the basic example of how we can use JavaScript to manipulate HTML. Obviously, if we whenever we will work more, we will we will do this with more bigger scale, and yeah, that's what we do in the whole front end development thing. So is it clear to all you guys? Like, is there anything that you guys are not able to understand? You can ask right here. Can anyone confirm? I'm literally waiting for your confirmation. If anyone can speak, should I call you guys by name? It's clear. Okay. Okay. You guys are not okay. As you guys are basically not able to see the inspect the okay. Okay. You guys did not say anything here. So just share the feedback that you are not able to see the inspect tab. I was expecting that you guys are able to see it, but it is not visible. Let me show it again. Let me show it again. Let me show the full screen. Oh, no. Exit full screen. I have to share the full screen. Is it visible now? Can you see this thing? The iframe, the developer console that I have opened.
Yeah,
Are you
it
able
is
to
visible,
see?
sir. Yes.
It is visible, right? Okay. Let me show you one more thing. What I was trying to say. If you see here, just focus on this thing. Okay. Just focus on this image thing. When I click on the turn on the light button. Okay, it is already on. Okay, just focus on this element. Okay, the one that is highlighted. When I click on the turn on the light button, we are replacing the source of that image. Okay, and you can pretty much do that you can pretty much do that with HTML. Okay, you don't have to explicitly you don't have to you don't have to refresh a page to do that. You can just, it is just that the source that you're defining over here should exist in the first place. That's the only thing that matters. When I click on the turn off the light button, the source get replaced, and this is how, we are falling in this example. So this is how you can basically manipulate HTML, and this is the one of the simplest examples that I was talking about. And let's move ahead. If you guys don't have any doubt, obviously, if you have any, then I think it is a good time to actually ask your questions. Is it clear till now? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, so the example that we saw, right? Likewise, we can actually do some pretty fun things, and for that, let me again share you. Yeah, let me share a whole screen altogether. I think that will be a bit easier, I guess. So, are you guys able to see my screen with the inspect tab that is open? If anyone may confirm, because I cannot see the chat right now because I'm sharing my screen. So, can
Yes,
anyone
sir, it's
confirm?
visible. Yes, sir, it's
Oh,
visible,
okay,
sir.
okay, great. Okay. So let's do one thing. What we want to do is, we want to update the heading. So the heading that you are seeing, right? The what can JavaScript do and test caddy. So let's do one thing. Let's do it in a very good way. Whenever we actually define the JavaScript, there are several options. The one option is you define that in the head section of the HTML file. Like we define the head over here, and there we can write the JavaScript thing. The other option is we can write that script inside the body, or you can pretty much basically include the JavaScript anywhere. Okay. So again, there are two options that you can define how you write the JavaScript. The one option is the old one that we already know, that we can use the script tag, and we can write the JavaScript right over here. And the second option is we can define the script tag, and we can define the source for it as well. Okay, so this two examples. In this example, we will try to define it, because it is much easier, because we are just trying to do this in the browser based console editor. So if we do something like function, let's say function, and turn on, we did this, and then we do this. I'm trying to show you, what we can do, how we can write it in another way. So I just like copied it. I just changed it. Now I copy this function and I make another function turn off and pick bulb off. Okay. Now what we do is when we have this on function, what we do is we just pass the name of the function turn on, and in this case we replace it with turn off. Okay. Now let's see if we can run it. If you see, we are still working, right? So you got the thing, right? What you can do is the simpler way is you can define the JavaScript function, and on click action you say that on click event you call this function, and what this function does, it just does the change that we were doing earlier. But now this is a bit more neat way to do it, right? And if you are wondering about this document variable, it is not defined. Like for example, if you have been coding on C, C++, or Python, then we need to define one variable, right? So the good thing is that this document variable is one such variable that is already defined by the browser when this page gets loaded. So you don't need to redefine it again and again. It is already, you just have to assume that it is there, and it will always be there if your JavaScript is running. It will not be there only in the case when when in browser you disable the JavaScript support. So there's an option in browser that you can do, which probably no one explores much. But yeah, that there is one possibility in which case it will not be there. But in that case, the person, they must have gone to the browser setting and manually have disabled the JavaScript option. So in that case, you cannot do anything at all. Like, okay, so let's try to do one thing. Let's try to take input from one input field, and let's try to change this heading. Okay. Oh, how we do that? Let's take an HR as we were discussing yesterday. All together. Let's just remove this now. We don't need this. The purpose of this is actually solved. Now let's make an input field where we will have this ID as the input heading. Okay, and then value equals to null. The initial value will be null, and yeah, we just need this. And then we have a button. Let's have a button where on click. That's we will make one function. What will do? Okay, and okay, let's write the signature first. Change heading, and okay, yeah, we did this. And now let's make one JavaScript function change heading that will basically change the heading. Okay, so we call this function right away. And what we do is we will basically we'll create a variable. Let's say new heading equals to, again, document dot get element by id, and what we pass in the id, the input heading. Let's maintain the consistency of the for naming convention, and dot value will give us the value. So now, for example, if there's an input field, you can get that element, and the dot value will always give you the value of that field. Okay. And what we want to do is, again, what we want to do is document dot get element by id, and then we pass the id of the element where we want to change it. Okay. So in this case, this is the heading that we are looking to change. Element by, this is the id that we are hoping to change, dot inner html. So why we are using dot value here, why we are using html here, I will get back to you in a moment. Just give me a minute. Okay, now this looks good. Okay, that we are getting the value that is there in the input field, and we are updating that value of whenever the user will click on this button, what we'll do is we will replace the inner html of this field. Okay. So for example, if there are if there are any tags that are basically that are basically not the input tags. So in that case, we just use this inner html thing. So this inner html is basically this thing that is there inside the tag. For example, in JavaScript, we in html we know that we can create any nested components in nested elements, and it can go on. There is very much possibility that it can have endless elements inside of it. So that's why these elements also always have this inner html thing. In the earlier example, we are trying to change .src property. So .html property basically has everything raw that is there inside in between the tags. .src is one of the property that images have. When we are when we're defining it, like because that's how the image will be printed on the screen, right? So this is the two differences. Okay, let's try to run it now. If you see, okay, I think I need to define it in a different way. Change heading, and then let's do something like this. I think, yeah, okay. So you can see that, we have the now we have the input field and stuff. But we do something, and when we change, you see the magic, right? New heading, and when you click on change heading, it gets changed to the new heading. New heading 2, it gets changed to new heading 2. 10, it gets changed to 10. You got the idea, right? Adi was able to catch like what we just did here. Is this clear to you guys? Like how we are changing this title?
Yes, sir.
So you got the case, right? That we were trying to read the input from the input field, and then when we click, we are calling this function. This function is basically like changing the HTML inside this thing, and that's how we are updating it. Okay. So for example, let's try this if this will work. And if we see this thing, it will not. Okay. Again, this is an H2 tag, so it will obviously be. It will always be that one, right? It will always be in the headed thing. So hello, if you see, okay, this looks good. If I see this thing and the magic, okay, whatever. So you're getting this thing, like this is very dangerous thing as well. You need to understand this, like that we are basically literally replacing whatever is inside this thing. So if there is any JavaScript or if there is any HTML tags, that will directly go inside there. So in production, when we do things, we change things, but not in this way because it is very dangerous, and an input can basically change it. For example, let me show you one cool trick how we can do it. Let me make an script. Okay, so for example, in basically in JavaScript there is inbuilt function that is called alert. You are check. So how this works is whenever this function is called, whenever this alert function, it is a inbuilt function. You don't need to define it. You don't define it anywhere. You don't need to include anything for it. Whatever is inside it, it just gets printed. For example, if I see, you see, it is printing your head, right? So let's try to tweak it. If I put this inside this thing, and if I say, okay, sorry. So why it is not working? Because it is treating them as a plain text, but rather they are script. And script. If I do this, script script, do I have some typo here? And JavaScript in, okay. Hello, hello, and script. Okay, I think something got busted. This example is not work, which was supposed to work. But okay, you got the idea, right? Like basically, it will replace everything that is there inside it. Probably there's some thing that I'm missing over here. That's what is working. Otherwise, it basically works. So if it is one of the easiest trick to check if any of the website is secure or not. Like you just write the script and you just put that inside the input box and you just send it whenever that. For example, I did this trick to find vulnerability in one of the websites. So whenever you put your name, well, for example, in all of the website we have the input field, right, where we have to define our name, first name, last name, and all those things. So in first name you can just post this script, and if they are not implemented this in a good way, then whenever you will open your page, this script will be executed, and this pop-up will always come back and stuff like that. So this is one way which you can fool people and scare them. So you got the idea, right? Like, no, this is how we are actually updating this is how we are actually updating this thing. And yeah, this is how this thing will work. So yeah, let's move ahead to this thing. And yeah, so yeah, you saw, like, you can define this script tag anywhere, and basically you can write the script anywhere. The only difference is between this example and this example is this, like, currently what we're doing is we are we are defined a function. So whenever this function will be called, this will be executed. But what we can do else is, like, we can write some JavaScript if we don't define it, if we don't define this, if we don't define new function, and if we write this here, then this will be executed directly over here. Okay. Give me a minute. I think there might be some noise, which should be gone. Okay. Okay, so, like, now if you write something over here, then it will be executed directly. Like, every time it will be, every time the page loads, it will be executed. For example, so if you see, if this function is not executed, we have this. Let's revert it here. We have this thing, right? Okay, so we have this default heading, right? But what if I want to change it in the page load time? What I can do is I will just copy this, and whenever the page will load, I am trying to bypass it. Like, bypass it as in, like, I'm trying to update it manually. Or how I can do it, update it, title, and, like, whenever the page loads, you will see the by default heading is this, but whenever the page loads, since it is not defined inside a function, where, like, it will be executed every time, and yeah, again, it will always update this. So that is one way. Like, you can just write the script inside the script tags and it will work. And yeah, again, as we were talking, like, we have three places to put the JavaScript file, or in places, like, one is head, one is a body that we saw, and another is the external JS file. For example, if we just put this script inside the head tag, then also it will work. We'll go inside this head tag, and if I print it there, if you see, this is not working. I think for some, okay, this is working, but this thing is not working for some reason. I think probably because the document variable is not yet available on the header or something like that. I might have to dig, because I don't usually put this header. That's, like, I'm not available, but you can put the JavaScript, because you can see that, like, this thing is actually working. That means the JavaScript is getting executed. Only this thing is not getting executed. So yeah, that is
Sir, I
one
had a
place.
doubt, sir. Can I ask?
Sure. Tell me.
Yeah, sir, I wanted to ask that in a general view, whenever we see some documentation and all, so we generally find the JavaScript part in the body tag, under the body tag. So
Yes,
why
yes.
that we generally use it in body tag and not in head?
So
Because generally we use CSS in head tag.
okay, yeah. So the only, I think it totally depends, and the thing is that they say, like, as you saw, if I do this thing in the header, it will not work. The only reason is, like, this is one of the examples where your JavaScript may not work in the header thing. So if you have an external JavaScript file, you can add it, but it is also it is also, like, one of the other way, like, we want to keep it beautiful as well. For example, this does not look very much beautiful a very indented file, but if I, like, if I let's separate this here, something like that, so, like, it will be very much clear. Like, we have the HTML, will have the head separated over some place, and we'll have the body, and then we'll have the script. The all together, this thing, three things will be separate. So one reason can be, like, we want to, like, keep our file very much beautiful, and that is why we can do. And the good practice is always to put that thing inside your body, and inside your body or outside your body. That always works. So, well, I'm not dig much into it, why we, like, any of the scientific reasons, to be honest. But I think, yeah, but I think you can explore it. But yeah, you can explore it. Okay, if you find something interesting, yeah, let me know. But this is one of the reasons. Till now, what I have been thinking is, it is good to have this thing separated in a way. So that is, okay, coming talking about that thing, we can also, like, define these things in a separate JavaScript file, and we can then, like, you do something like, src, and then my js.js, something like that, where my js.js is the file where this whole thing will be there. So these are, like, these are three ways with which you can define JavaScript. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, you can put JavaScript in three ways. One is head, body, and the other is the external JavaScript file that we saw. Okay, so now let's go into, like, what are these statements? Like, that in JavaScript everything is a statement. Like, for example, if we see our example, like, if we see our example, this function, this thing we have defined, this function, these are statements. This is one statement, like that. So anything that we write is a statement, and in general, like this is true about like every programming language, right? We have statements and computer executes those statements one by one, right? So this is how this is the same thing in JavaScript as well. Okay. Now there are things how we can define variables. So how you can define a variable as we do in any of the programming language. We define the we define the type of the variable and then we define the variable name. And again, then when we define the variable name, there are there are several there are several rules that we follow. For example, the variables can start with any single letter or underscore. Any variable can have capital letter, small letter, or underscore or digits, but it cannot start with digits and stuff like that. That is true for JavaScript as well. I will be skipping that part because I think you have been working with C or C++ probably. If that is not the case, let me know. But that was my assumption. So the same rule follows here as well. That it is the same how we define the variables. This is also the same how we initialize the variables. The only thing that you will find interesting is this var and let are not the usual data types as we have in C C plus plus. Like in C, what we do, we write int I like this. What we would how we write in C, we do something like int x equal to 5. Like here what we're doing is we're doing where x equal to 5, something like that. So there is a difference on it. And in in JavaScript, the data type of the variable is assigned at the runtime, not at the definition time. Okay. So this is very much possible that it again JavaScript is a scripting language, right? And this is the main feature of the scripting language, that the data type is assigned at the runtime. That makes it a bit slow and bulkier as well. But yeah, this is for the ease of us. That is why we call them scripting languages. So okay, is it clear? I will talk about the difference between var and let, but are you getting it right? For example, we just need to write var or let or const. There are three things that we can write: var, let, or const. And I will dig more into it, like what are the differences between all of them, and then we will move on. Okay, so you can use any of the three things: var, let, or const, and then you can add the variable name, and then again you can assign it anytime that you want to. Okay, so again, yeah, literals. Okay, I think I had updated this slide, but it is not here. Okay, so literals as in okay. So what are literals? The strings and integers are literals in JavaScript. So this is one. This is the integer literal. If I say where name equals to Kuldeep, and this is another literal. Okay, so like literals are basically the string values and the string values that we have. That not this value assignation, like mostly this 5, this name and stuff. These are two literals. Like no, this is the integer literal and this is the string literal that we have. Is this part clear as well? I hope I did not mess it up. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so variable, as we were talking, like no, we define some variable and we assign someone. This is pretty much simple thing in here as well. And then operators again, we have this plus, minus, asterisk, and the slash thing like that we often use for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division across all the languages mostly. And this thing remains constant, and it is the same thing in JavaScript as well. It does not change. Okay. So now now let's work on some JavaScript. Before jumping on the ES6 part, let's jump on the some JavaScript thing that I would like to that we would like to work. Okay. For example, in are you guys aware about the array in any of the programming languages that you have worked on? If you're not aware, I will explain it. But if
Yes,
you are
sir.
aware,
We
then
have known about it from C++.
great, great. Okay, so the same thing. Let's try to likewise we have some concepts of similar concepts of loops and other things, loops and arrays and all those things. For example, let's define an array, which can be x underscore list, and then we can just define it as like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and yeah, this will pretty much. Uh, okay, it is showing. And oh yeah, okay, there's a typo over here. Okay, a variable x underscore list equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is what is x underscore list? It is a list of integers, right? How do we iterate on it? How do we iterate on it? We just get a for loop for I in x underscore list where I is less than x underscore list dot length, and hold on, I will explain you guys so what are those things. And console.log, as we use plain, right, we have console.log in JavaScript that basically logs everything on the console, and we can write x underscore list and then I, and let's see if it does not work. For I, okay, we have something, okay. Okay, we have something, let me fix it. uh, I think we have not defined variable here, probably because of that. Okay, it is still. Oh, okay. Sorry. This is not like that. For I equals where I equals to 0, I less than console.log. I don't know why I cannot use console here, but maybe it should not work. I think okay, yeah, I was certain it should not work, but yeah, this is how you can iterate. Basically, whatever you write over here, like whatever, let's say you do something. Oh yeah, so this is how you can iterate on a simple list as we do on C++. Like we initialize the indexing variable, and then we call the length. So in JavaScript, in any of the array, dot length property is by default there, that basically represents the length of that array. So you don't need to run some while loop or for loop to basically count it, or pass it to some external function. You can simply call the dot length parameter and it will basically work for you. So this is one of the ways how we can do it. This is simple in most of the languages, right? We do the initialization, we print the termination point, and then we do the updation part here in the for loop. This is pretty much standard in any of the for loops, right? And that is what we have here as well. Okay, so that is one way of writing for loops. The another is for I in stuff like that. Okay, let's go over there as well. So for example, another way of writing this is for I in x underscore list, and yeah, we are good here. What is I over here? I is the index of an element in X list. So if you want to access that element, that current element, what you do is what X underscore list, and then I, and you access it like that. So if you are, if in some of the languages, when we use this variable often holds the current value, but in JavaScript this value holds the index of that current value that is actually undergoing this thing. So, for example, let's say we want to find the biggest number in this loop. How we can do it? Like we can simply make we can simply initialize one value where max equal to, let's say, 0. We can initialize it, and how we do in any of the simple C language and stuff. If max is less than x underscore list dot I, then what we do is basically we update the max equal to x underscore list dot I. This is how we do everywhere, right? And this is how you can do it here as well. And then the max will have the same value. So if you see the output is here, right? This output is actually getting printed over here. Okay, so I don't call the console, rather I need to just call it. For example, here as well, I think if I write it like this, I think this will work. Okay, let me remove it and say if I do this. I was hoping this will work. I'm not sure why this printing part is not working. It's been some time since I used this. I used this in the last session that I took, but okay, we need to say. Okay, let's not dig it here. But you get the point, right? So this will give the index, and this is how we can do it. Likewise, for example, if we these two examples will always be the same, right? We'll just need to do the same thing here as well, and this will work as it was working earlier. And if you print the max thing, you will see that we are getting the max value over here as well. So yeah, this was about the loop thing that we know. So likewise, like while loop that we had, do while loop, the switch cases, and all those things that you probably have read in C or C++. The syntax in JavaScript is also it is almost similar to that. They're like literally not much different. That's why I have omitted that part because I think you have been working on that part, so it will be like kind of you already know that part, so maybe I will skip it and I will tell you things probably that you might not have heard about. That will save both of us times, right? And make this session worthful as well, so, fruitful as well. So that's why I have omitted that point. But if you guys still have any question in those parts, then probably let me know. I will pick that up right now. Okay. So that was one part about this thing about this basic JavaScript that we have, and let's move to ES6. Okay. So in JavaScript, like we don't have like we don't have one of the basic things that we usually have in MS programming languages. For example, we don't have for example when we declare a function, let's say when I declare a function, right now it might have, but earlier it was the case that if I'm making my function, let's say this is my func. So if I, let's say if I'm calling, let's say well, and then if I do something over here and I do something here, that I do something in this function, and when I call this function, I will have to my func, and I will have to always pass the value. I will have to always pass some value. But the thing is that in JavaScript, it was very strange. Like that you cannot. So, for example, when we don't want to pass a value, what we do, we pass a default value, right? We do something like this. We pass a default value, and if it is not there, then we pass. For example, if you call this, then the value will 9 will be passed. But if we do something like this, then the 10 value will pass. But it was not the case until recently in the year 6. This changes actually got into this. Yeah, I know this is very one of the basic things, but yeah, JavaScript lagged back then. So again, so yeah, scope. When we talk about scope, it is same as it is same scope. So let's talk about like scoping. Let's do one thing. Let's define something. Okay, let's define well I equals to 10. So this is one scope. We define one function my func, and then there I do something, and there I again define one value where I equals to, let's say, 5. And again inside this function I will let's say I define for I in let's say where x underscore list, and again we have this 1 2 3 4 5 some array over here, and x underscore list, and again I do something like, again I define some value where I equals to 3, and then I do something. Oh, okay. So you will see that I have redefined this value many times. Once I have defined it here, once I have defined it here, once I have defined it here. Okay. This I is confusing. IDX. Okay, now it is pretty clear. Okay. Okay. If you see, I had defined this I variable in 3 places, and these are the 3 scopes that the value will be. For example, if I have not this when I've defined it outside of any other function, then it is a global scope. When I've defined it inside the function, it is a function scope. When I've defined it inside a block, it is a block scope, right? So if I use this value inside this function, then this I will be used. If I use I inside this function, then this I will be used because I have defined it in the first place. But of course, if you use this I if you print it I here, then I equal to 10 will be there because this function scope variable is not defined yet. But after this definition, this local scope function, this local scope variable will be given priority and it will be used, not this I that is defined in the global scope, right? Likewise, inside this for loop, this I that we have defined over here will be given priority than the I defined over inside this function, or the I that is defined outside of this function that is defined in the global scope. And these are the 3 scopes that we know. This the one is called a global scope, the one is a function scope, and one is a block scope. So is it clear now? Is it clear, like the scope thing in this is clear, guys? I think it is clear. Since you guys are not saying anything, I will assume the answer to be yes. Okay. Also, it says that okay, it should be where, not well. Okay. Okay. So this was about the scopes. Likewise, we're declaring variables. Okay. So we were talking about let val equals to maybe one, where and val equal underscore 2 equals to 2, and then we have const val underscore 3 equals to 3. Okay, now so these are three types of variable. These are three types of variable that you can define in JavaScript. One is let, where, and const. So for example, one of the basic thing in JavaScript was that, like, you can redefine the variable at any time. So like, for example, I can again do this thing where val underscore 2 okay equals to 3, and this will work. If I print the val underscore 2, you will see this value has been updated, right? I have defined this variable, but I am declaring it again, and now the declared one will be given priority. This will be so. Now in this example, probably you will say, like, no, what is the problem in that? Like, since we're declaring it again, now the thing is that it became a security issue. For example, nowadays, like, you see that we use a lot of JavaScript libraries in any of the web applications, right? So and when we include those JavaScript libraries, I think those the variables defined over there are already there in the document, in the document scope of the HTML file or the browser or the page that you have opened. So, like, anyone could redeclare those variables and actually mess with the whole application, whole front end application. And the thing is that in front end, whatever the browser has received will be shown, and we saw it yesterday, right? We can inspect the element and we can change it, right? So that makes it more vulnerable. But let's see if what if we try to redefine the value one. So if we say let well equals to 3, and if I again say well, you will see it is giving me error, right? Duplicate declaration of well, because it has already been defined. So if I define any variable with let, then I cannot redeclare that variable again and again. Okay. Likewise, I think this constant very much understandable, like, that this is the constant variable, and it cannot be redeclared or re-changed at any point of time during the runtime, right? So these are the two, these are the three types of variable declaration that we have in JavaScript, and yeah, that is I wanted to walk you guys through. Now hosting, okay. So in when you're not using the, like, script strict mode, then the thing is that, for example, let's say I'm not declaring this variable right over here, and well underscore 2 equals to let's say where equals to 3. So, I don't know what happened. Okay, some weird thing happened. Let's say val equals to 2, and if I go where val, oh, it is good. Okay, it is getting crashed. Okay, so let's try it in the inspect element. So this is a fun thing, you can write JavaScript in this console as well. Of course, they are there. Okay, so if I define val equals to okay, value equals to 2, then a value 1 value is defined. Okay, but what if I'm using a variable that is not defined? So in any of the languages, if you see, like, if you use the variable that has not been defined yet, then you get one error that the value has not been defined, and like a reason you must define the variable before using it. But in JavaScript, there is a concept called hosting. So what this does, it if I am using one variable, for example, if I use this console dot log, and let's say I'm trying to print some weird variable. Let's say the name of the variable is Kuldeep. If I try to print it, Kuldeep is not defined. It is saying, okay, I think probably there's some. It is running in the strict mode. So whenever we run JavaScript, like, one mode is when we run the script where, like, where all these things are possible. Like you can like, redeclare variables, or you can probably, like, bypass all the bypass all the things that uh, bypass all these errors basically, like, and use JavaScript in, like, in the vulnerable state. And one is a strict mode. When we use the strict mode, all these things are not pretty much possible. And I think this console is actually running over there. That's why I'm not able to show this example. But if you run this example, then it is pretty much possible that, like, if you don't. So this hosting concept basically tells us that if I'm if I am using this variable, let's see if I'm using this variable as console.log, and if I am using, let's say, Kuldeep variable over here, so what it will do is it will define this variable in the top of the page, and it will assign it a by default value of as something like, well, Kuldeep equals to undefined, so that when if you will print this variable, you will get this undefined thing. If you use this variable, you will get this undefined thing, that this is not defined. So I'm showing this thing. If you forget to do this thing, javascript will go in the top of the page and it will do this thing for you, so that you don't have to worry about it. So this concept is known as host, that if you forget to define the variable, it will go on the top of the page and it will define an undefined value. It will define the variable and it will assign an undefined value to it, and next time when you will define it, will get fixed. Okay, this exponential operator is, if you have, so for example, like, let's say we want to do, like, 2 into 2. It is pretty much simple, right? That we get 2. But this exponential variable, the exponential operator that was introduced, basically, for example, if I do 2 into 3, it becomes 6. So basically, when we want, when we want to do the power thing, so I think ES6 is not supported over here, but it basically translates it to 2 to the power 3, and 2 to the power 3 we know is 8, right? So this exponential operator basically supports it, as we have the same feature in Python. That is the same thing that you can do with JavaScript as well. You just need to pass it to a stick, and that signifies that you're doing exponential operation, not the multiplication operation. And that defines it. And default parameter that I talked about earlier as well, right? That if you don't define any, if you want to pass a default value, then you can basically pass a default value to the function from now on. But earlier it was not possible. Right now it is possible, very much possible. The other thing is that arrow.find thing. So they have actually, like, introduced pretty much pretty cool things in JavaScript. I think I will be able to show you. So these as we were talking, like, in the array we had several properties that is there by default. One was the dot length thing, right? When we call this dot length thing, the length of the file gets, like, the we get the length of that array. Likewise, in array.find thing, you don't need to actually run the loop. Rather, what you need to do is basically, for example, let's say if we have an array, let's say x underscore list that is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you need to do something. So, for example, let me get the example. Let me get the example. Probably, uh, give me a minute. Yeah, so for example, we want to get, like, we want to perform any operation. So for example, what you want to do is maybe, like, let so we want to check if there are any numbers that are greater than 3. Okay, so for example, we are given an array, and what we want to do is we want to find, if we want to know the possible, we want to check if there is an element that is greater than 3 and is available on this list. One way will be, we'll do, like, find for I in x underscore list, and then we will do something like this, and then again we will do, if x underscore list, then this I value is greater than 3, then we will, then we will define that found equals to true. And let's say we have already find, let found equals to false, and we will do this one equals to 2, and then we will break something like this, right? If you found the variable, then we will break it. And okay, I is not defined. Okay, for where I think the true is not okay. I think small t will be okay. Yeah. So this is how we'll do, right? Like, we will we will run a for loop, and then we will do this basic operation, and then we will do something like this, and that is what we're trying to, like, we want to minimize it. So how you can do again is, again, let new underscore found. Basically, what we can do is we can see x underscore list dot find, and there we will say that this is the x value that we are currently processing, and I need to check if x is greater than, let's say, 3. and you will see that the value of new underscore found value will also be true. Okay, so what we're doing is basically these are known as arrow functions, and we will see them in a while. What is this function and stuff like that. So this is how we can minimize writing this whole follow. So what uh, yeah, so what we're doing is like we are using the array, and then we're calling this find method, and this is the arrow function that we are passing. This is the condition that we want to fulfill, and it will return this value. It will return this value as in if it finds anything that comprises this, then this will basically break the loop and it will return that value. If it does not find it, for example, let's say if you want to see if there any variable greater than 6, then new underscore found will be false. I think there's something wrong with this editor. It should ideally work, but I don't know why it is not working. Console.log. I think there's something wrong with this editor for sure. It is not working. I will use a better one next time. But yeah, this is the case. Like you can define this function. Like you can define this, and this is how you can make it. This is how you can concat the function to this very small minute level. And this was about this thing. This was about the add dot find one, and likewise we have another function that is find index. So instead of returning instead of verifying this condition, it basically returns the index of the element that basically satisfies this function. So that is the same thing, just we will get the index. And then this number properties things is there. So number properties things, for example, if you do competitive programming, you probably initialize your code with by having some maximum number possible in C, the to the power 63 plus 1, or the negative number can be minus to the power 61 minus 1 and stuff like that, right? So these are those two things that basically got added in here as well. I will quickly show you. I will quickly show you here. Let me know if you guys are able to see it, right? So these are the properties that are added in this thing, the epsilon interval between two representable number, and these are all constant that have been added. Max safe number, so maximum safe integer in JavaScript is probably 3 - 1, likewise max value the largest possible. So you probably might remember, sometimes when you are working with some problems, you want to initialize. For example, in our case, when we want to find the when in this case, when we want to find, okay, where is it? Yeah, in this case, like for example, when we want to find the maximum element, we initialize the value with we initialize the value with 0. Rather, what we can do, to be safe, we can initialize the max element, max with the smallest number possible, like a number and the minimum value. It will basically it will be there like that. So these are some of the constant things that is there in the number one that have been added recently in this number properties as well. Now the callback functions. Okay, so callback function, there is a very good concept of this callback function, which I think I will like to show you. Okay, so let's say. Okay, let's take one example. Let me take the example. I have it somewhere. What was it? Callback functions. Okay. Give me a minute. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. So for example, sometimes when we are when we have created a lot of methods, there is one way with which we invoke the functions, right? Sometimes let's say we want to let's say maybe let's do one thing that let's make several functions. That is okay. I think I will just show you the source. That will be quick, maybe. Okay. Are you guys able to see this? The callback functions, right? So here's a quick example. We have defined this greeting function, we have defined this process user input function, and then we are calling this process user input function, and then it is basically calling this probably it is okay, yeah. So in JavaScript, the way you define the function does not matter. The way you invoke the functions actually matter. So, for example, though you have defined this greeting functions and process user input function separately, but if I call this greeting function first, then this will be executed first. And if I call the function later, then this function will be called this function will be called like after it. Like all this the flow of the function, the flow of the execution goes sequentially. Like one thing, as we saw, like these are all statements. So statement number one will be executed first, and then it will go to the statement number two, and likewise it will run the whole file. Okay, but in some cases, like for this is a synchronous call. Sometimes it might happen that we want to know when we want to know whether that function has been executed or not. For example, if we let's say if we see oh, where is yeah if we see, okay, so let's say we have a function func func1, and we do something very big, like something sometimes you can say that it takes a lot of time to execute this function. When I say a lot, like literally a lot, like maybe 1 or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, something like that. So whenever we have called this function, we want to give a signal that I have executed, right? So for example, what we can do the simplest is we can alert that hey, I am done, right? This is the smallest. So how it will work? Whenever I will call this function one func func1, and if I execute it, you say this is saying I'm done. Uh, so you get the point, right? That whenever this function will be executed, this will be called. Likewise, so what we're doing is we are just calling some other. For example, let's say, okay, let me edit it, as it will keep popping, and we don't want that. Okay, yeah, let's see, I define another function, and that's name of the function is callback. It can be anything, right? It can be callback, and it says that alert, it is alerting, it is showing no, let's console.log, this saying I am done. And whenever we are done, we'll do the callback, we will call this callback. And likewise, whenever we call this function one, you will see, okay, func1. Whenever we call this, whenever the execution completes, we'll call the callback function, and then I am done will be called automatically, right? So you're getting the point. When we are done, we want to notify something that yeah, I am done. This is the concept of callback. That if I'm done, I will notify someone that yeah, hey, I am done. Okay. So this is a very simple complex of callback. When it is why it is important in JavaScript is we will see it later on that so JavaScript is actually no, it is running asynchronously. When I say it is running asynchronously, it's like though if I do this thing, if I do this thing, if I call this two functions, right? I will call this function one, and I will call this function two. So ideally, the expectation is that the function one will execute first, and then this function two will be executed, right? Though they're called sequentially, as in like, the function one will be called first and the function two will be called after calling the function one. The important crux of this JavaScript is it is asynchronous. So it will not wait whether whether execution of function one is completed or not. It will call the function one, and then it will immediately start executing function two as well. And likewise, if we have some another statement, then it will statement. Yeah, so again, it will not fail for all these two function calls to actually get completed. It will start executing it, and they will be completing in somewhere in the background. And this is one of the tricky thing that we need to take care in JavaScript. It is all asynchronous. And now you get the point, right? Like when I call this function one, if it takes more time, so for example, right now we're not able to understand the difference because we're doing very small things, and they literally do not require anything. Like they are so fast that we're not able to know the difference. But for example, when you call an API, as an API, is in like we want to load something from somewhere. Like for example, we are calling some different URL, and we are expecting something from. So we're expecting some result from them. Okay, so that might take time. So that might take some time. So for example, in function, if we're doing that thing, and then we call the function two, and for example, let's say response. is let's say we have response equal to something like this, and then we want to use this response to do something. We want to do something with this response at a point. Okay, so no, the normal expectations are like no, we'll call this function. When this execution of this function is completed, the response value will be like no filled with the response that it will return from this function one, and then it will then we will do whatever we want to do with this response variable. But it is not the case. What it will happen is this function will be called, and then immediately the next statements will start executing. So now, since you're expecting that response is having some value, probably like some JSON or some string or some something, some sort of value that is there, it will not be there because it is in the undefined stage, and because because this function is yet to be completed. This function is still executing, and that is one error. That is something that we need to take care in JavaScript a lot, and that is why the concept of callbacks as well. And likewise there is another concept of promises and rejections. So this is very beautiful chart of it. I think, let me pull it. I had seen it on web, and I think that might be helpful for us. Promises, chart. Okay, yeah. So let me share that. So this chart, okay, so understand this chart very carefully. This understanding this chart is very important. Okay, so whenever we call something, we this call basically returns a promise. For example, when I call this function one, this function is not returning. For example, if I do something like return one, I'm returning a value from here, right? So whenever in when if we go by the flow, then this function one is immediately returning a promise, not this value one. And okay, I think I put it in a wrong place. Okay, now it is clear. Okay, so we do something like very bulky. That might take some time, and even if that is not bulky, sometimes even updating a simple component takes a lot of time, and that becomes bulky thing as well. Okay, so you don't know what thing might become bulky. So for example, yeah, so this function one will immediately return a promise. It will not return the value one until it is completed. When this bulky thing operation, bulky statements that are there inside the function, when they get compared, then only we will receive this value one that is being written by us. But until then it will be returning a promise. So what is a promise? So it is saying that I'm executing, and it is promising that I will I will return you something. I will return you something. And yeah, whenever if the execution of that promise is if the execution of all the operations over there is done, then basically it fulfills the promise, or it rejects the promise. Okay, so for example, here when we call this function, we get a promise, and if the execution of this function one succeeds, then it will be fulfilled, and we will actually then we'll actually get the value one. But if it is not, if it for some reason something happens inside the calling of that function, then it will be rejected, and we will get something. And that is, for example, we will use this dot then and dot case thing probably tomorrow or something, when we working with React and Node and stuff like that. But yeah, it whenever we call something, we what we get is we get a promise, and if that promise is succeeded, then we will if that promise is fulfilled, then if the execution is succeeded, then the promise is fulfilled and we get the actual value. Otherwise, we the promise is rejected, and we get some we need to declare it in the code, that the execution of this has failed, and so on like that. So again, this is a very theoretical concept, but probably tomorrow, day after tomorrow, when we'll be working with React and Node, then I will show you the exact example. I'm not showing it right now because it will become a bit confusing, and I don't want to confuse you guys as of now. So, but yeah, for sure tomorrow, day after tomorrow, when you will be working with React, I will definitely show you this thing. So that was about the callback. So that was about the callback function. Callback function. So yeah, everything that we talked about is not at all related, not directly related to the callback thing, but that originates the idea of callback thing, right? Like if I'm done something, then I need to call the call. Then I need to if I'm done executing those things, then I need to call some function, and that is called the callback function. So the simplest way of implementing in callback is probably like, just call the callback function, like when it is done executing. So yeah, since it is this callback will be name of the function, it will not be literal callback thing, like it will be the name of function. For example, let's say let me pass this. I think it should work now. So what I'm doing is, along with the I am passing a function in the parameters. If you see, I'm passing this function in the parameters, and after this execution is done, this function will be called after it. And this is how we are this is known as callback function. So this is the one manual implementation of it. When we use promises and stuff, this callback things becomes important, and then we actually pass some this callback functions. Like if it is succeeded, then we pass some callback function. If it fails, then we pass some different callback functions, and that's how we tackle those things. Okay, so is it clear? Callback function, like we just simply pass a call. We simply pass a function, and we execute it. We call it at the end of the operations of that currently existing thing, and then we get notified that this is done. Are we good with callback functions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then arrow functions. Okay, so arrow functions are very basically their simple way to basically minimize the whole writing of the how we write functions is can be replaced with arrow functions. Okay, so for example, let's say I want to add two numbers. So how can I add two numbers? I will define a function add. I will do a comma b, then I will do a return a plus b. Right, this is how I will do, right? But with arrow function, I can simply say let add, and then I can do something like this. No, let add equals to a comma b, and then what I'm doing is a plus b. Done. Now I don't need to write function in this way. What I just need to do, I call it the same way I call it, add 1 comma 2, and boom. Okay, it will be executed, right? So you're getting it, right? I define the function as a variable name. This is the name of the function that will be there, and these are what are these a comma b? These are the variables name that are there. These are the name of the variables that will be there, and what it will return? It will return a plus b. Like, are you getting it? Like this is a very simplest example of an arrow function. So instead of writing this whole bulky like 3 line 4 line code, I can minimize it. So for example, if we are starting with arrow functions, and probably write very small functions, because otherwise it will become a bit messy, and if you lose it somewhere, then you will start hitting it. But it is a very good concept. For example, if we have worked with Python, then in Python we have lambda functions, right? And so you can compare arrow functions with the lambda functions in Python as well of define. If you don't know about lambda function, then yeah, just ignore it. Ignore this comment. Okay, so yeah, this is how we define it. Likewise, I can define another function, subtract, and then again I can say a comma b. It will accept two variable, and then it will return a minus b. Then again I can do what is subtract, and then I can say 3 minus 2, and it will print 1. Okay, I think there's some typo in the name declaration, and yeah, it will work. So it's add 1 and comma 2 is 3, and subtract 3 comma 2 is 1, right? So this is the simplest definition and example of an arrow function, and this is what you can explore. We talked about promises, right? Whenever anything is executed in JavaScript, we get a promise. We don't get the return value, rather we get a promise. When the execution is done, because because these things are running asynchronously, they're not running synchronously. When the execution is completed, then we will get the then the promise will be fulfilled, and then we will get the value. But otherwise we will not get it, right? And there's another concept async and await. So for example, we were talking about this, right? That I will call this function 1, and then I know that this function will take consider the example that we talked about, that we have a response variable, and we call this function, and it will fetch something from somewhere, and it will return us something, right? So one way of managing it, because the concept of promises, using dot then and dot case becomes sometimes it does not look good. It is good, but in a way, like, it is personal bias sometimes that I also sometimes I don't feel like, it becomes a bit complex in writing, and then, like, someone who is a newbie who is reading that code won't understand it in the first go. So there's like, there is very what is it? There is a very like, good implement good a good way to basically do it in a very simple way. For example, let's say if I am calling this function and I know whatever I will do inside this function will be like, bulkier in this function, so I probably will take some time, will not execute in a way that I can interpret. Then what we can do is we can define this function as an async function, and then inside the function we write this await and probably load some data and stuff like that. Okay, and then so this async and await combination is required whenever we are using it. So now when I call this function, it will see that the function one is declared as an async function, right? So now if even the function two is like, right there beneath it, but it will block the process until this function is completed. Okay, so one way is like, using promises in a good way, so that unless and until that promise is fulfilled, we're not moving away from it. The other way is using async and await. We define the function, we just label the function that it is an async function, and we say inside the function that, yeah, this is something that will take some time, and yeah, let's wait for it. Let's wait until it's completed. It will, like, it will wait for it. When once it is done, it will return the value, and then again you will have the value in the response, and then you can do whatever you want with the response variable. Okay, is it clear? The async of it. We just want to we are just enforcing it to wait for something to happen, and that's what we're doing. So that was about async and await, and yeah, guys, we are done for today. These were the basic topics that I wanted to go that I wanted you guys to work through today, the async await and all those things. And if you guys have any questions, you can shoot it now, and probably, like, we can talk about it now as well. If there is any question, then also we can take it. Yeah. Let me know if there is anything you guys have any doubt or you guys want to talk about. Okay, Prakhar is there. I don't know when he put hello, sir. Yes, Prakhar, you can ask your question if you're there, if you're still there. Apart from it, those who have joined via this thing, you can probably share anything if you want. You can ask, or yeah, basically we can sum it up. Yeah, yeah, we are half an hour early today, but tomorrow will take some time because tomorrow will be walking through the React and all those things. So my take will be that, like, again, go to the W3 schools and learn JavaScript from over there. I will share again. I will share you the link from where you can reference. Again, those are, like, very basic basic introduction of JavaScript and stuff. I am putting those things in chat, and you guys can follow it up. And yeah, likewise, the other good documentation is the MDN. MDN is one which I like reading because they have defined it very beautifully. They have very nice UI and very minimalistic UI, which I personally, this is my personal bias and I like it. So you can choose any of it and you can go through it. JavaScript is, like, if you have worked with any of the programming languages earlier, then it will not take much time. It will be very, very easy to go. If you have not worked, then yeah, it might take some time to understand the things about, like, the literals, the variables, and all the other things that you have heard. So yeah, that's from my side. Since you guys are not saying, I'm assuming that you guys got what you're looking for. Like, you guys understood everything which I shared. If you still feel, if you have any doubt, you can ping me anytime. Yeah, just these guys have my contacts and they can share it probably with you later on if you ask for it. So okay, guys, that's from my side. Thank you.
Okay, sir, it was a pleasure having you with us for this event, and it was quite insightful. We learned a lot about JavaScript and ES6 today. Moving ahead a step from yesterday, where we learned about HTML and CSS, it was a very smooth pathway for us to mm, get those insights yesterday and now learning today. So I'm hoping the audience would also have got a lot of insights, and they would be coming back tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Okay.
guys, then see you.
Thanks a lot, sir. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.